Hell yeah, dude, it's time for the vector guide. Dude, bros will just look at this character and be like, I can fix her. Dude, I suck at making intros, dude. I need to like hire someone to do this part. Anyway, today we got a guide. We're going to be going over vector. I got a little carried away when I was recording this. I was having a little too much fun. So this is a longer than usual guide, but we go over everything you could possibly want to know for this character. I'm hoping by the end of this guide, you have a very, very solid understanding of the character and how to use her, and you're going to feel very confident just slapping her into any content and doing pretty good. So let's stop yapping and let's get into it. All right, guys, so we're going to start by talking about skills and abilities like usual. Vector's kit is actually very well designed in that it kind of plays itself. You're not really going to have... It's very difficult to mess it up. You're going to be rotating between your two main skills back and forth every turn. And when you want to get like a big burst of damage or implant fire weakness on a lot of enemies, you just hit the alt. So we're going to talk about all the skills just in case you kind of want to know how the pieces fit together, even though in practice you're not actually going to have to think too hard. All right, let's start with her passive Perception Block. Perception Block is going to undo years of hard work by the gaming community and teach you that it's okay to stand on the burning tiles. She's immune to all the negative effects from burn, and in addition to that, whenever she attacks an enemy who's already afflicted with overburn, she's going to put a new debuff on them called Overheat Combustion. This is going to allow you to do extra damage to the target and also kind of radiate your fire damage out in an AoE from that target. So it allows you to kind of turn the team into a pseudo AoE fire damage dealing team. In addition to that, she's also going to allow anybody who does support attacks that do burn damage to increase the number of attacks they can do each round by 1. And finally, the last thing her passive does is that if she ever starts the turn with full Confectance, she will consume all of it and give herself a nice 10% attack boost. This is awesome because this is one less thing you have to worry about. You can completely ignore Confectance on this character, and it'll automatically cash itself in at the appropriate times for a nice little damage bonus. Moving on from her passive to her other two main skills that she's going to be using, Dead End Meltdown and Portent of Doom, you'll notice that each one of these skills has a 1-turn cooldown. This means you're just going to alternate between using the two throughout the fight, but each one does something a little bit different. So let's start with Dead End Meltdown. Dead End Meltdown is a single target attack that also does an AoE on the target if they are affected by burn debuffs, which they most likely will be. After that, it also applies Overburn to the target if they don't already have it, and it gives you 2 points of Confectance back, which once again will be building up in the background as you get closer to catching them in for your passive. Portent of Doom allows you to implant a new debuff called Smolder that says whenever the target is hit by a fire attack, they will radiate out fire tiles underneath them. These fire tiles inflict fire weakness on targets and allows you to have another way to inflict fire weakness on turns when your ult is not available. And she gets 2 points of Confectance, just like her other skill, which will be banked away and cashed in later via her passive. Now that we've covered all her skills, let's talk about her ult. Her ult, Syrian Finale, is going to hit almost the entire room with an AoE burn attack that's going to do a little bit of damage, but leave behind fire tiles that will inflict fire weakness on everybody standing on them. In addition to that, she's also going to put a buff on all your teammates called Accelerant, and give herself an immediate extra action to use one of her first 2 skills. The buff Accelerant will give your teammates a small damage boost, but mostly, if they do any burn damage, they'll get to do an extra instance of fixed damage with it. The ult's primary use is obviously to inflict fire weakness on multiple enemies at the same time, but the Accelerant buff allows your team to do significant damage to a boss, even if they're benefiting from damage reduction because they still are not stability broken. This is extra handy at the beginning of the fight when the boss has their full stability, or after they've just recovered from a stability break. And that's it. That's her skills in a nutshell. I know that sounded like it was really complicated, but as we're going to see in the gameplay section, the skills flow into each other very, very nicely, and you won't have to do a lot of thinking about how they're all going to be used. From there, let's move on to the fixed keys. For Vector's fixed keys, I have good news. They're almost all useful. The only one that's a mandatory include is negative motivation. This one allows her to also supply support attacks for the team, but more importantly, it benefits from her passive. So even though at the end of this ability here, it says this effect can only be triggered once, the passive affects this and allows it to be triggered twice per turn. In addition to that, it also allows her to apply overheat combustion when she uses it. Other than that, for boss battles, Proliferating Despair is a good choice. It obviously just does an instance of fixed damage to the boss, because bosses are usually large targets. And Dispassionate Support is another good choice, since, you can always use cleanse debuffs on bosses. The other one's Hospice Care, which I cannot believe they actually named this ability that. Vector, please do not cremate them. They are not dead yet. But this one allows you to spread even more incineration tiles across the map if for some reason you're fighting lots of smaller enemies. But once again, her ult kind of hits the entire map, so this is less needed than the other skills, but it is nice to have. Splattering Pessimism is okay. Once again, this will start her with 6 Confectants, which, if you remember correctly, will just get immediately gobbled up by her passive to give her a turn 1 damage boost. Nothing crazy, but, it's nice if you want a turn 1 damage boost for whatever sort of content you're doing. Finally, Unfortunate Jinx is actually a surprisingly good fixed key. Since her ult is going to cover almost the entire battlefield with fire tiles, she will very likely be able to stand in cover and also on a fire tile at the same time. This will essentially just give her infinite amounts of stability. She will continuously get stability, and as long as she's not taking multiple big hits a turn, she'll be able to soak 1 or 2 big hits from the boss every single turn with a good stability damage reduction. Combine this with heat recovery, and she can be surprisingly tanky in cover. And that kind of covers it for fixed keys. Once again, the only one you really want to take is negative motivation. The rest of them are up to you for whatever type of content you're doing. Talking about common keys real quick. Obviously, her common key is really good, Death Knell. Once again, she wants to stack as much attack as possible because all the fixed damage instances and overburn instances are based off of the attack stat that you have. So this is just fantastic for her overall. Another really good one is Afterglow. This is Tololo's key. And in addition to that, she can also benefit from a couple other ones here. I'll put them up on the screen. These are all universally good on her. If not, just all you want to focus on is common keys that focus on giving her lots of attack. Moving on to weapons and weapons attachments. It will come as a surprise to no one to find out that her custom elite weapon is by far the best one for her, since it not only increases her personal damage, it actually increases the team's damage as well. This can result in anywhere from a 10 to about 20% damage increase across the team. If you're on a limited budget and you're trying to figure out if you should grab her elite weapon or not, it is worth pointing out that, as we'll talk about in the Fortification Segment section, her first segment is actually pretty strong. It increases the team's damage by about 30% with a few other little nice abilities piled on top of it. So it's probably a better idea to grab that versus the weapon. But if you can grab both, go ahead and grab both. If you don't manage to get her weapon, a nice free-to-play option is the Svarog. It has a huge attack stat on it, which is fantastic for Vector because that's exactly what she wants. She wants to stack as much attack as possible. You won't get anything out of the calibration ability on it, but neither will you get much from any of the other submachine guns either. For 4-star options, you can just use either the 4-star Vector, or unfortunately, I guess you're going to get stuck with the MP7. You're not going to trigger the ability on it very often, but hey, it's better than nothing. Next up is weapon attachments, and surprise, surprise, the Fire Boost weapon attachment set is by far the best since she is 100% fire damage. Now, you can also use Phase Strike like I am using here because she will trigger this ability very easily. Any one of her attacks will put a phase debuff on the target, which will enable this for the whole team. And it's most likely that you farmed a bunch of these somewhere along the line, so just use whichever one you could get the best attack stats with. Since she is going to be a DPS focused character, she's going to want to grab the holy trinity of DPS stats, which would be attack, crit rate, and crit damage. However, she wants to prioritize attack much more than the other two, since all of her fixed damage instances are based off her attack stat. You can grab crit and crit damage if you got some decent attachments laying around and you got nothing better to do with them, but you can also get away with other stats such as health, but primarily focus on maxing out as much attack as you can. She does more damage than usual for supports, but she's not going to be topping the damage chart. She won't be beating Chongju or Sharkery or anybody else on the burn team. So don't sweat it too much if you can't 100% min-max her gear. So with that, let's move on to fortifications. Talking through the different segments for the character, you'll see that most of them are the standard issue. This segment is going to increase the character's outgoing damage, but there's a couple of the ones that are actually a little unique. The first one, segment 1, is one of the more unique ones. You can see here that I have it, but I don't have it unlocked yet because I want to keep it disabled for the gameplay section. What this segment does is it increases the damage that a target is going to take from burn damage attacks by 30%. In addition to that, it's going to radiate the damage out in a 3x3 area, and it's going to allow characters that perform support attacks dealing burn damage to do an extra one. So this is a very large damage boost for the entire team. You're going to get 30% damage on the target, obviously, lots of extra attacks, because once again, this also affects her own support attacks, so she'll be going up to 3 support attacks herself. And since the AoE is going to be radiated in a larger distance, you're probably going to overlap targets more often with this. So this actually is a 30% on paper, but it's actually probably a little more, especially with a properly built burn team that's going to be doing almost completely fire damage. The second segment is nothing crazy. It applies another buff to the accelerant, but you got to remember for the alt, you're only going to be using the alt once every 4 turns. So it doesn't come into play that often. While Burning Assault is a powerful buff to add to your allies, there's other ways to get it. For example, Centaurisi and Ksenia both apply this buff as well. And with it being on a 5-turn or a 4-turn cooldown, its value is limited. So there's nothing too crazy about this segment. Segment 3 is another, this is a very standard damage boost, right? It's going to take Dead End Meltdown. It's just going to give it bigger multipliers, and it's going to allow you to ignore the burn debuff needed for its application of overheat combustion, but it doesn't really matter because the only time that would ever really come into play is on the very first turn of the very first action of the very first turn, because after that, somebody will have applied a burn debuff to the target. Following that, Portent of Doom. This one gets an interesting extra buff or debuff on the target called Overheat. This is the same debuff that Cheetah gets. It prevents the target from using skills and abilities, kind of like Paralysis, but once again, it's not going to do anything to bosses, and certain elite enemies are also immune to this. So you're going to get a limited amount of usability out of this, but it is nice to have. You can use it in some creative ways on some fights. Segment 5, this one's a little more interesting. What this does is it makes the passive, when she applies Overheat Combustion, which is, once again, applied anytime she attacks somebody with a fire debuff, they will also radiate, or they'll also leave behind fire tiles underneath them, which, as I said, limited use with this because so your alt is going to cover the entire field almost, and then after that, your skill 2 is also going to be able to apply it when the alt is down. So you have lots of ways to inflict fire vulnerability on targets already, but this is going to give you yet another way to do it, and you could really spread it out. So you could have like 3 targets that are all leaving behind fire tiles on the ground, which is interesting, but once again, it's nothing to get too crazy about. I don't even think there's really a use case for that many different like applications of fire weakness. And then obviously it just gives you a little bit of a damage boost as usual per the standard segments. This one just comes in the creative way of based off how much confectants you had. And then finally, segment 6 is another very standard. Here's just a damage increase. Once again, though, it's tied to the alt. So because it's tied to the alt, you're going to get limited use out of it, right? You only get it's going to be on a 4-turn cooldown. You're only going to get it every now and then. You're only going to have it help half the time. She does get another buff to herself, which once again, bigger damage increase, but nothing that really changes how she plays. So out of all these segments, the most impactful by far is the first segment, which makes her a great starting point for a lot of teams. And in fact, we're probably going to cover this in the investment guide that I'm going to talk about for the fire team overall. Vector plus her segment 1, you're pretty much good to go. The rest of it, the rest of the team and the rest of the pieces you need to make a very viable and functioning endgame team are all from the free-to-play banners and other resources. So definitely recommend segment 1 if you're looking to invest a little more in her, but you can get by without it. It is, at the end of the day, just a 30% damage increase for the team. So let's talk about team building for Vector now. The biggest strength of her by far is the fact that as of right this very minute, she has a fully functional team at her disposal. Vector, Chongju, and Sharkari are going to make up the 3 pillars of the burn team for the foreseeable future. In addition to that, for the 4th person, you can slot in either Centrarisi or Ksenia. Both of them do the job of a healer very well. Ksenia is a little more flexible with how she buffs the team, and Centrarisi does a little more healing overall. So for fights where the boss is really throwing a lot of AoE damage out, Centrarisi is a little bit better. But you can easily get by with just Ksenia if you didn't grab Centrarisi. There are a couple future units that pair really well, but the reason this team does so well together in the meantime is that they feed off of each other perfectly. Each one of their skills kind of feed into the next skill. Vector will apply Overheat Combustion, somebody will apply Overburn, then somebody will get a support attack from that, then somebody will trigger a support attack from that, etc, etc. I'll kind of show it here on screen, and we'll talk about it in the gameplay section. But these 3 units, Vector, Chongju, and Sharkari specifically, one of them makes an attack, and you just causes an avalanche of support attacks to follow up. And because Vector is now applying the damage in a semi-AoE through Overheat Combustion, you don't even have to worry about single target versus AoE. If the enemies are grouped up, you can kind of kill it all equally quickly. That being said, you can use her in other teams. Just keep in mind that she's going to lose a lot of her power by not being in a fully functioning burn team. She really wants teammates that can utilize burn attacks to get extra value out of her accelerant. But she can work all alone by herself. Just keep in mind that you're going to be very limited on the number of fixed damage procs you're going to see from her Overheat Combustion. If you're a brand new player and you're desperate for teammates, couple of the options include Cheetah and Krolik. They're both free-to-play units that you get for just playing the game. Cheetah can use her first ability, Spicy Candy, that does do burn damage, so she can just repeatedly throw that out there to stack onto Vector's attacks. And then Krolik has the ability to apply Overburn in an AoE that radiates out from her, which will allow multiple instances of Vector's support follow-up attack using her fixed key. They're not ideal teammates since they're kind of limited on how many attacks they can put out, but they're better than nothing, and they will give free-to-play players a nice starting place if they're kind of trying to just kind of progress through the early stages of the game while they're waiting for a Chongju or a Sharkari to arrive. Alrighty, moving on to my favorite part, the gameplay section. Now, we're going to start with the new wonderful target dummy, 6P62, President Yuzong's daughter. She's going to be standing in for him today, and I want to kind of just demonstrate how the fire team kind of cascades their attacks. There's a lot of different ways you can approach a fight, but the standard way for what we're going to do today is just kind of to illustrate this main point. You can have Vector go first if the enemy doesn't have fire weakness already, but as you're going to see here, it doesn't really matter what attack you do or what order you do them. it's just going to trigger a cascade of support attacks from the rest of the team. So we're going to do, doesn't really matter which one we pick. We'll pick Portent of Doom here just for an example. What's going to happen is Centurice is going to attack first, then Vector's going to attack, and that's going to trigger Chongdu to do attack, and then that will trigger Sharkry to do attack, which will then come all the way back to Vector. So, nothing special about this attack. This is just whatever. But it did fire damage, and it was a target attack, so Chongju will do a follow-up. That inflicted overburn, so Sharkry will do a follow-up. Because it was also an overburn attack, then Vector will do an attack. And this is going to repeat about 4 times throughout the rest of the fight. So, once again, Centurice, when she attacks, same thing. Chongju will do an attack. This is also going to apply overburn specifically, but Sharkry is going to run out of support attacks to do here. But she's just going to keep making them until she runs out. There we go. This applied overburn. Sharkry is going to make an attack. Vector is going to make an attack as well. Another overburn was applied, so Sharkry's going to make yet another attack. At this point, Sharkry's out of support attacks to make. Chongju still has a couple more to go. She's like, I didn't hear no bell. And finally, Sharkry has decided she's done making support attacks for the turn. But we'll just do one more real quick just for fun. But as you can see, like I said, the cascade of support attacks from each member on this team is pretty intense. And you have to remember, because Vector has overheat combustion on the target right now, any targets that are directly next to this main target are all going to be getting hit with AoEs the entire time. We'll show this in the next section a little better, but that was just to illustrate how this team essentially just feeds off of each other. And for the rest of the fight, you would just be alternating Vector's 2 abilities. So like, now we'd be using Dead End Meltdown. Next turn, we go back over to Portent of Doom, etc., etc. And you just rinse and repeat that for the rest of the fight. Okay, here we have a really good example of some of the things that Vector can do. So we have Bliet Balls here that we're going to be fighting. We are on Frenzy 18. I had to crank it up because I tried to demonstrate this on Zero Overcharge Frenzy, and well, she died in 1 turn. So we're going to have to crank it up a little bit here, the difficulty. This is a very good boss to illustrate some of the key points I was talking about. So when she's not stability broken, she reduces damage taken by 80%. And when she is stability broken, she takes increased damage. So this is a really good example of why Vector is so good, because we're going to first inflict Fire Vulnerability, which is going to help us break this stability even quicker. And in addition to that, we're going to use Portent of Doom here, and you're going to see why in a second. This kind of plays into some of the aspects of this fight, makes it so interesting. So we're going to do 1 attack, and we're going to trigger 1,000,000 follow-up attacks. So from doing 1 attack, we've already lowered her down to 13 stability. And in addition to that, because these are all fixed damage instances, even though she's reducing damage by 80%, she's still actually taking a decent amount of damage. So we're going to fast forward to the next part here. You'll see here, once her stability gets broken, what happens. So when her stability gets broken, she's going to enter her enraged state, and she's going to drop ice tiles all over the place. Now, when she does this, she's immediately going to get tagged by somebody because we just applied overburn. And because she has the smoldering debuff on her, she's immediately going to put fire down underneath her again, re-inflicting the fire vulnerability, or the fire phase weakness here. And so at this point, fire phase weakness has just overridden all these frost tiles, which are bad if you stand on them, obviously. But remember, fire good, so we can stand on all the fire now. But we're just going to continue the rest of the fight. I'm going to fast forward a little bit to kind of illustrate the rest of this point. Okay, so we're at the end of the first turn, and she's already taken 1/4 of her total life. So that's pretty solid damage. Now she's actually stability broken, and we're going to have a whole turn to just wail on her. So once again, we're going to kind of fast forward through a bunch of this. And at the end of the second turn, she's already half dead. We still have fire weakness implanted on her. And from here, the rest of the fight just rinses and repeats. You know, we have Centuries to heal up the team real quick. And everyone's good as new. And then we just continue on with the fight. But like I said, 2 turns of wheeling on the boss, and the boss is already half dead. And because it has fire implanted weakness from Vector, we're just going to shred through this stability again in like another minute. So, and I purposely did that last turn wrong. There was a couple of mistakes that I made as far as like what order to use abilities. I didn't ult on Changju initially. I just kind of wanted to show you can literally just kind of like whatever, just like, hey man, this is like a fun ability, just press this button, and then I don't know, like Sharkery, that's a fun unit, right? Just maybe press a button. I don't know, maybe just use this one. This one looks like a cool ability. Look at this. Wow, she lost a bunch of stability real quick. So like I said, this team is very easy to use, very straightforward, and you don't have to worry about like quote messing it up. So it's just a powerful overall well-rounded team. I have Diane here because if the boss ever for some crazy reason tried to counterattack or tried to attack one of our units with a directed attack, she could counterattack and trigger another Changju support. Yeah, Ernizzle, we know. We don't want the basic tips, we want the pro tips. Give us the pro tips. Well, unfortunately, there's not really a whole lot of pro tips to be had. The only thing that you really need to consider when using her is, do you instantly need to inflict fire vulnerability or implant phase weakness? That's it. If you don't instantly need to implant fire phase weakness to the target, then you can have somebody else try and apply a fire debuff, because remember, her ult doesn't immediately apply a fire debuff to the target until they stand in it for a turn. So if you can have someone like Changju do one support attack, or Centrisi put Overburn on the target first, then that'll allow you to get more value out of her skills to apply Overheat Combustion immediately. But once again, you're only really missing out on like maybe 1 attack's worth of extra damage. It's not the end of the world. And along those same lines, if you don't immediately need the phase weakness and you're about to enter a burst phase on a boss, like maybe they take more damage or something, you can wait to have her go to the end of the turn, use her ult at the end of the turn so that the 2 turns of accelerant are fresh on all your teammates for the following phase. Alright, this video is already way longer than it should be, so we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you all for joining me. I hope you guys had fun. I hope you learned something. Feel free to tune in on Fridays on YouTube for Friday Night Frontline. It's a stream I do. We play the game, we mess around, we just chat and have a good time. So if not, I will catch you guys in the next one. See ya.